I started out as the anchor. I had no training. I mean, I'd worked at this little radio station, but I hadn't done much. I mean, these on-the-scene reports, I didn't know anything about reading the news. It wasn't, I'll say this, it wasn't nearly as complicated then as it is now. I mean, our graphics consisted of a black felt board, and we had these yellow stick-on letters, the black velvet board that we stuck on there, and then they'd do a double exposure, and that's how we would identify people. Where those were the letters. I always say that I was the anchorman and the guy in charge of graphics. For our graphics, we would use things like when one of the news magazines came out with a color picture on its cover of, say, President Kennedy or President Johnson or some famous person. We would just cut those pictures out and then paste them on a different background, and that became our graphics. And I used to do that. And we didn't have a teleprompter. We just, wrote stuff out on copy paper like we had at the newspaper. And it was very interesting. The station where I worked, Channel 5, had been the first television station west of Richmond, Virginia. And the way it wound up in Fort Worth, instead of Dallas, quite frankly, was that the people at the Star-Telegram heard about this new thing called television. They went to New York to find out about it. The people from the Dallas News heard about it. They sent their people to New York to find out about it. The Dallas News people came back convinced that FM radio was the wave of the future, not television. And so the Star-Telegram, rather than the Dallas News, wound up with the first television station. In the beginning, they were both NBC and ABC. And it all sorted itself out down during the years. But since they had never seen a television newscast, and all they had seen were movie newsreels, their first newscast, their primetime newscast at 10 o'clock at night in the Central Time Zone, was like a movie newsreel. It had title cards. It would come on, it was called the Texas News. Then this music would go, da, 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 the Texas News. And then if it was a sad story, the music would go, boom, 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 boom. And then the title card would come up and say, 2 killed in freeway crash. Well, all of this was silent film. And you had this off-screen narrator who told the story, just like in a movie newsreel. Well, this newscast had dominated as other television stations came to the area. This newscast would always get more than half the audience. Even the people in Dallas watched this Fort Worth station. It was very good for what it was. It was very comprehensive, but it was all local news, of course. Well, when the Vietnam War came along, that became the lead story many nights. So they decided to change it. So when they hired me, because I'd been to Vietnam, I would come on at the top of the hour and say, here are the big stories tonight. And if there were no big national stories, I would just give 3 headlines. And then I would say, we'll have more details, but first, here's the Texas News. If there was a big story from Vietnam, as there usually was in those days, then I would come on, do the lead story about what was happening in Vietnam. I'd say, we'll have more national and international news later, but first here's the Texas News. Then we'd run the newsreel, then we'd have the sports, then we'd have the weather, and then I'd come back and do all the national stories after that. But it was very interesting. I mean, I just sort of figured it out as I went along, and I had no training in television at all, but then again, neither had anybody else. I mean, that first station, nobody ever built a television station except in New York, so they got some plans for a school, and they basically used those plans to build that television station, except where the gymnasium was, they made that the main studio, and where the classrooms ran around the outside, that's where the offices for the news department and the sales department were. But that's getting to be a long time ago. And but anyway, that's how I got started. And then, that job led to another job in television, which led me here to Washington.